On the night of November 4th, 2025, Russian forces launched a large wave of drones and missiles toward Ukrainian cities. Air raid alerts sounded across multiple regions while civil defense crews battled fires and power disruptions. The following 48 hours saw a rapid Ukrainian response that targeted military logistics and energy hubs inside Russia and in occupied Crimea, marking an escalation in the contest over infrastructure that has intensified approaching winter. Independent and official reporting in the following days helps outline what happened and why these events matter strategically for both sides. Ukrainian planners appeared to focus not only on immediate retaliation, but on disrupting the pipelines of fuel, electricity, and drone supply that enable sustained cross-border strikes. That emphasis is consistent with months of Ukrainian attacks against depots, substations, and refineries, aiming to raise costs for Russia's war effort and complicate its winter campaign. Analysts in open-source communities and reporters on the ground trace several of the early November incidents and confirmed damage at a number of sites. One focal point was the occupied Donetsk airport complex, a site that open-source analysts had associated with storage and preparation of Shahed-type drones. Satellite imagery published after November 5th showed at least one warehouse destroyed and another damaged, indicating a successful strike on a node believed to support assembly and launch activity. Ukrainian sources framed the attack as the result of prolonged surveillance and targeting work by special operations units, artillery, and long-range unmanned systems. The importance of that site stems from how inexpensive drones can be massed to stress air defenses. Disrupting storage reduces the rate at which launch crews can push sorties and may force relocation to less efficient facilities. While Kyiv's claims about total quantities stored on site could not be independently verified, the observed structural damage and post-strike fires suggest the neutralization of valuable stocks and equipment. This, in turn, can depress launch volumes for a period even if production elsewhere continues. Another headline event occurred hundreds of kilometers from the front at the Volgograd refinery, operated by a major Russian producer. Following a reported Ukrainian drone attack in the early morning of November 6th, operations were halted as critical units were damaged, and a civilian in the city was killed by falling debris. The facility handled roughly 13.7 million metric tons in 2024, amounting to just over 5% of national output, which underscores the scale of the disruption, even if repairs proceed. Energy facilities are tempting targets because refined products power trucks, aircraft, and generators, while electricity keeps rail hubs and command nodes active. Analysts have noted that strikes since early in the year have touched a significant share of Russia's refining capacity at various times, producing a pattern of intermittent outages rather than permanent shutdowns. The cumulative effect is felt through higher logistics friction, regional fuel shortages, and the diversion of air defenses to protect far rear assets. In Crimea, Ukrainian drones hit an oil depot area in the Simferopol district near Volgograd, with Ukrainian special operations units describing impacts on a pumping station that supports military needs. Local reports during the same time frame described collateral damage from air defense fire in Simferopol, highlighting the risks of intercepts over urban areas and the complexity of protecting fuel infrastructure close to population centers. These incidents reinforce that Crimea's logistics network remains contested. Further north, officials in the Kostroma region reported attempted strikes against energy infrastructure. Local authorities emphasized that electricity supply continued, while independent footage showed emergency services at a gas distribution node associated with a thermal plant. Even limited damage at such facilities forces costly inspections and can prompt temporary defensive measures that reduce efficiency, stretching maintenance crews and spare parts inventories ahead of peak seasonal demand. Meanwhile, Russia continued its own large-scale attacks on Ukrainian power assets, causing civilian casualties and grid disruptions. In early November, barrages combining drones with cruise and ballistic missiles targeted substations and generation sites, part of a recurring strategy to degrade Ukraine's energy resilience. Ukrainian air defenses intercepted many inbound threats, but not all, and repair teams faced repeated challenges stabilizing supply to urban centers and industry. The exchange underscores how both sides are attempting to shape the winter environment. The tactical logic is straightforward. Electricity enables water pumping, heating, railway traction, and command systems. Fuel refineries enable ground and air operations and sustain logistics chains. By striking these nodes, each side aims to reduce the other's operational tempo and increase costs. The strategic logic is broader, forcing the adversary to disperse expensive air defenses over vast territory, creating dilemmas between frontline coverage and rear area protection. This dispersal is visible in regions that have expanded drone alert zones and airport restrictions during major attack nights. Open-source satellite analysis and Ukrainian official statements indicate that the Donetsk airport complex had become a multi-purpose site for receiving components, integrating warheads, and staging launch crews. Post-strike imagery, displaying roof collapse and burn scars, aligns with secondary detonations from stored fuel or munitions. While precise counts of destroyed drones are not publicly verifiable, the damage pattern is consistent with a significant hit on throughput capacity rather than a minor disruption. Beyond immediate attrition, such strikes impose a planning tax. Units must rehearse new routes, rewire communications, and implement tighter camouflage and dispersion. Each change carries training overhead and increases the chance of procedural errors. Over time, that friction can translate into lower effective launch rates, higher mishap risk, and more opportunities for defenders to intercept or geolocate launch teams. When combined with hits on fuel sites, the effects compound along the logistics chain feeding the battlefield. The Volgograd refinery case illustrates how a single complex contains multiple critical units, from crude distillation to hydrocracking. Damage to one high-throughput unit can sideline a large share of output, even if auxiliary equipment remains intact. Shifting crude to other plants is not instantaneous, and product flows to regional markets may tighten, affecting both civilian demand and military allocations. The pattern observed across several refineries suggests a campaign designed to create recurring bottlenecks rather than permanent destruction. Crimea's role in Russian logistics remains central because the peninsula hosts airfields, depots, and rail links that support operations in southern Ukraine. Strikes on depots and pumping stations seek to disrupt fuel transfers to air bases and motor pools. Reports of hospital windows shattered by defensive fire in Simferopol illustrate the risks of layered air defense near civilian infrastructure, a challenge faced by any defender trying to protect dense logistics areas under drone attack. In public messaging, both sides highlight successful intercepts and minimize damage, while the visual record shows fires, scorched structures, and halted units. Independent outlets and wire services have verified several events with geolocated footage and satellite images, adding transparency to claims and counterclaims. That triangulation helps separate battlefield narratives from documented facts, though fog of war uncertainty remains around quantities destroyed and repair timelines. The most reliable signals are operational, temporary closures, flight restrictions, and confirmed unit shutdowns. For Ukraine, the benefits of rear area strikes are not only material. Forcing Russia to allocate air defense assets to deep sites can thin coverage over front lines, potentially easing pressure on Ukrainian brigades. For Russia, sustaining pressure on Ukraine's grid aims to strain repair crews, reduce industrial output, and test civilian resilience. The contest is therefore iterative, with each side adapting routing, decoys, and timing to outpace the other's defenses and repair capacity as temperatures drop. Human costs remain visible. Reporting from Volgograd noted the death of a civilian during the refinery incident, while Ukrainian regions struck during the same period suffered fatalities and injuries from missile and drone impacts. International humanitarian law requires distinguishing military from civilian targets and taking precautions to minimize harm, principles that are repeatedly challenged when energy and transport nodes sit near urban areas. These are sobering realities of modern warfare that reverberate far from the front. Another thread is the economic dimension. Repairing energy infrastructure draws capital, skilled labor, and scarce components. Insurance risks rise, and regional markets adapt to intermittent supply. For militaries, the bill arrives in diverted air defenses, emergency power generation, and accelerated maintenance. Analysts tracking refinery outages across 2025 have assessed that while the damage has not been permanently crippling, the cumulative effect is meaningful and forces Russia to prioritize repairs and defenses across a large territory. The Donetsk operation showcases how open-source verification has become integral to war reporting. Community researchers sift satellite data, cross-reference thermal signatures, and match structural changes to known site layouts. When their findings are echoed by official acknowledgments, confidence grows that a real capacity loss occurred. This cycle of verification also informs future targeting as both sides learn which facility segments, like gas distribution nodes or hydrocracker units, represent the true choke points. Russia's nationwide response has included broader air defense alerts and temporary flight suspensions at multiple airports during large raid windows, measures that ripple through civil aviation and logistics. Those reactions underline the strategic goal sought by Ukrainian planners, widening the map of assets that must be guarded. Every additional site that requires coverage dilutes the density of protection elsewhere, especially given finite interceptor stocks and radar coverage limits across a vast geography. Looking ahead, the winter contest will likely hinge on repair speed, spare parts access, and the ability to disperse critical functions. For refineries, modularity and redundant units can limit downtime. For drone logistics, smaller, more dispersed storage and rapid setup procedures can reduce vulnerability. For power plants, hardening gas distribution nodes and enhancing perimeter sensors may mitigate damage. Each measure, however, carries costs and cannot be applied everywhere at once, which is exactly the dilemma a deep strike campaign aims to create. Ukrainian domestic resilience also depends on continued air defense improvements and fast grid restoration practices that have evolved over successive seasons of strikes. Mobile repair teams, spare transformer pools, and distributed generation help shorten outages. International partners have supplied components and technical aid to harden substations and diversify supply routes. The balance between offensive disruption and defensive repair will shape living conditions and industrial output through the cold months. For observers, the key takeaway from early November is not a single explosion, but the connected nature of the targets. Drone warehousing at an occupied airport, an oil refinery deep inside Russia, a fuel depot in Crimea, and gas distribution tied to a thermal plant. Taken together, they illustrate a campaign aimed at reducing sortie rates, constraining fuel flows, and compelling the opponent to protect a longer list of high-value sites. That is the essence of imposing strategic dilemmas with relatively low-cost systems. The limits of public information require careful phrasing. Exact inventories destroyed in Donetsk remain unconfirmed, and repair timelines at complex industrial facilities can change quickly. Still, converging reports across reputable outlets, corroborated images, and official statements provide a sturdy outline. Ukrainian forces struck drone infrastructure in occupied Donetsk, hit a major refinery at Volgograd, and targeted fuel storage in Crimea, while Russia expanded air operations against Ukrainian power assets in return. That pattern raises the stakes for both grids as winter advances. Dispersed basing is one adaptation likely to accelerate. Instead of concentrating hundreds of drones or warheads at a single airfield, operators can distribute stocks across smaller rural sites, rotate launch crews, and rely on mobile power and data links. That reduces catastrophic loss risk but raises coordination demands. Every added site needs fencing, camouflage, fire safety, and hardened storage, which pulls resources from frontline units and stretches logistics trucks that were already under pressure from long routes and winter weather. Electronic warfare plays a growing role on both sides. Jamming can degrade satellite navigation, force drones into inertial fallback, and distort altitude data. Defenders integrate radio direction finding to pinpoint launch paths while attackers harden guidance with multi-constellation receivers, terrain matching, and pre-planned waypoints. Both sides experiment with decoys and false targets to soak interceptors. As the electronic contest intensifies, even small reductions in guidance accuracy can move impacts from precise equipment pads to open ground. Air defense economics remain central. Interceptors designed for fast jets and ballistic threats cost far more than one-way drones. When defenders fire a high-value missile to stop a comparatively inexpensive target, they win tactically, but face a poor exchange ratio. That imbalance incentivizes layered systems that add guns, short-range missiles, and rapid-fire munitions. It also fuels innovation in low-cost counter-drones that use proximity fuses and optical tracking. Over time, a better cost match can blunt massed drone raids. Rail transport is a strategic backbone. Fuel, ammunition, and heavy spares move most efficiently by rail, after which trucks handle last-mile delivery. When depots or power plants that feed rail yards suffer damage, train schedules slip and sidings fill. Even short interruptions create backlogs that ripple for days. That effect is amplified in winter when icing and snow increase braking distances and reduce throughput. Protecting traction substations and junctions therefore becomes as crucial as guarding any single depot. Energy grids are complex systems with built-in protections. Automatic relays can isolate faults, reroute flows, and prevent cascading failures. Yet transformers are large, custom-built, and slow to replace. Stockpiles of mobile units, spare bushings, and breaker components can cut downtime, but availability depends on procurement cycles and allied support. Temporary generation from gas turbines and diesel units can stabilize critical nodes such as hospitals and water pumping stations, buying time for permanent repairs. Refinery recovery timelines vary by unit. A crude distillation column might return after inspections and gasket replacements if not directly hit, whereas a damaged hydrocracker can require lengthy overhauls with specialized catalysts and heat exchangers. Safety protocols drive cautious ramp-ups to avoid overpressure events. In many cases, operators run reduced slates or shift to producing simpler products while complex units are offline. That keeps some fuel flowing but rarely satisfies full regional demand. Insurance and compliance pressures shape industrial behavior under threat. Risk underwriters reassess premiums and deductibles after every incident, pushing operators to invest in perimeter sensors, foam systems, and blast walls. Regulators may impose updated emergency plans, fuel stock requirements, and reporting standards.